Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
We've got some special tips for you today. That's what I'm going to say. Some tips and
Well, we definitely have
tricks.
some tips. I think one of the things we want to dive into is we know a lot of people out there who are definitely playing the competitive scene. I'm confident you have some friends and players in your community who love Cathay and are taking those pretty awesome Sky Lanterns. Oh, they sure are great. But this video is not to talk about how powerful the Sky Lanterns are. This video, we want to give some of the newer players who maybe not as experienced generals or some tips, just kind of going through each faction and saying, hey, this is the faction, this is the army I love, this is what I'm playing. What can I do to try and handle or mitigate some of the threat or challenges that the Sky Lanterns are posing to my army, right? So it's kind of more of a tips and tricks video rather than talking about should Sky Lanterns be adjusted or not. We'll let other videos talk about that. GW address that when they get to it. But let's kind of focus on that. And I also want to say before we dive into it, this is not really a new specific thing. The Sky Lanterns are just the new hottest thing. They are the new Alpha Predator in the meta, but we've gone through many Alpha Predators already in this meta, haven't we, Evan? From the beginning of it. First, it was the Screamlists. That was a big Alpha Predator at the beginning. So at one point, everyone was concerned about Linehammer being the Alpha Predator.
Yes.
Remember that? That was a big scare. Last year, we also went through, of course, the Chaos Lord on his Chaos Dragon and all that save, and that's been addressed in many different ways. That was a big Alpha Predator. And my point is to say that the meta is always changing. It's always changing, it's always evolving, and that's half of the fun that the rules team keeps dropping new arcane journals, new updates, new factions, new lists, new armies, and keeps the game fresh enough that you're constantly trying to solve the next puzzle in terms of what can you do, and that's really exciting for everybody. But it does from time to time, unfortunately. Oops, a new Alpha Predator, a new contender appeared, and you have to adapt to that and find ways to handle that new contender. And for veteran players who are playing every week, all the time, constantly going to events, it's fairly easy for them to adapt because they're used to it. They're constantly in that tournament mindset. But for the more casual player base, which, let's face it, is the vast majority of the player base out there,
Yes.
and also the vast majority of the players who are watching this content right now, and the vast majority of players who attend our events, are what I call competitive casual. They love Warhammer. They want to hang out with their friends and roll dice. They're not really expecting to podium. They're expecting to they want to have a great weekend and have a great game with a friend. That's really what they're showing up for because they live the game of Warhammer. So this video, these tips and tricks, is really for them to let's just go through your roster and say, what could you take that actually is fairly decent? It's not going to be a silver bullet. I'm going to say that right now. Sky Lanterns are good. It's not do this and you will win, but there are things each army can do if you make some adjustments that could help you in these situations.
Yeah, and just to point out that, this is kind of a thing that can happen in casual games when both people are casual. It doesn't just come up when, okay, I'm a casual guy and I happen to be playing against some kind of a meta-chasing power gaming type person. It's, what if my friend who just picked up Cathay because they really like the brand new plastic and they want to get into playing Old World, and
they're awesome.
Yeah, and your game just kind of gets really awkward. You're like, are you sure it works that way? Is what you say while you're playing the game, reading the rules and having it, roll out the results. And it's like, so as long as you're aware of what's going to happen, you can help plan ahead. And that's definitely a skill that you learn over time. So we're going to help with that. Our plan is to basically go through the core factions and talk about what in your roster and what kind of upgrades you can take that help versus that particular matchup, and something that might be start working into these lists, because if you don't think about what Cathay does and you just play a normal Warhammer army, wow, I covered up
it
my
will definitely
face.
surprise you.
This background. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely going to surprise you. Okay, so we're doing dwarves first. So the Grand Army, shows many of the unit options that there are for dwarves. So you got a couple things. So the big threat with the Cathay, it seems that 99% of all Sentinels, Sky Lanterns, take the Dragonfire bombs with the bombing run. So the bombing run is strength 5. It's a blast template. So any kind of like large blocks of infantry that are arrayed in kind of more of a square shape tend to get hit by quite a lot of those. If you're in more of a thinner line, like often like dwarf units might be, because they're trying to get more crossbow shots, stuff like that, you don't have as big of an issue getting hit with the templates. And then they have the Dragonfire bombs.
Let's talk about that for a second. You can do something about that. A lot of dwarves have drilled.
Yes. So if you use drill before you're moving or before you're charging or anything like that, you can kind of change your movement or your deployment so that you can potentially be narrower. Now, marching column is just as good as being in a long line, and especially against, let's say, a big old Cathayan gun line, there might not even be any kind of a threat that can charge you that you care at all about. So you might as well just go into marching column, sprint across the enemy table, and you're also taking less damage potentially from those, bombing runs dropping on your head because you're not in a
Hmm.
square. The worst thing you can do is be 5 models wide, 5 models deep. You get hit by the large blast, and every single goddamn model gets hit by that thing, right? Because it scatters
Yep.
like 2 inches and it just still hits everybody. I really liked doing that when it was Fiery Convocation and it was a spell I had to try to cast. But now
Hmm.
you just have a unit that just keeps doing that every single turn, and it becomes like, okay, I have to actually just change the entire way I'm playing to help, think about that, right?
Yep.
So, yeah,
So that's one thing, right? Positioning. Another
yeah,
thing, dwarves, of course, have great artillery and guns as well. So, of course, typically you wouldn't take as many of the range fire. But let's just talk about the war machines for a second. So, cannons are great. Don't get me wrong. Cannons are still very effective. But cannons, if you only take cannons, the sky lanterns can put themselves into positions where you won't be able to shoot them because you might be at risk of hitting your own troops. Therefore, it makes the shot not a valid shot to take. So actually, while the cannon is, if it hits and damage, very effective, very powerful, it is less able to adapt to the maneuverability of the sky lantern. But stone throwers, on the other hand, are actually, if they hit in the small circle, guess what? The sky lantern's base is huge.
yeah.
So actually hitting it with the dead center of the template weapon is actually significantly easier to do. You will hit just as hard as a cannon. You will wound just as hard as a cannon, and it's going to be, and they can't avoid you. And if they happen to try and hide behind some terrain, guess what? You have indirect fire to shoot at it. So I know cannons are fun. Don't get me wrong. I love cannons, but stone throwers, in my opinion, are actually more effective at damaging and hitting sky lanterns than actually cannons are.
Yeah, and they're especially in the dwarves because the cannon does D3 wounds and the grudge thrower does D3 plus one, and the rules
Under the
writers
hull.
are
Yeah.
unaware of the fact that D3 plus one is essentially twice as good as D3. I mean, it's just how many times do you roll your damage on a cannon and you roll a one? And you're like, so I just shot a very large arrow at you, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
And when something has a lot of wounds, you really need every little bit of multi wound damage you can get. So I definitely think that a lot of the dwarf players go for those grudge throwers. The bolt thrower is like always doing the 2 damage at least, which is, I guess, more consistent than a cannon, right? And
Hmm.
rolling to hit against a large target, usually not that big of a deal because they're probably getting really close to you to have to do those bombing runs and dragonfire bombs. So again, they're going to get close to you, so you're going to be short range with bolt throwers. And they're also a lot cheaper than the cannons. You have multiple of those shots, and you don't have to worry about, whether you can see the spot on the ground to shoot at them and all those kind of things. So
Hmm.
I think that having the bolt throwers, the grudge throwers, the cannons, they can all do something. And so no matter which one of those you can have some kind of a way to shoot at them or threaten to fire at them. Mike, you kind of were saying, yo, you don't usually take the ballistic skill shooters. I was actually going to say that in particular, because the Sky Lantern is toughness 5, that dwarves have a pretty good answer in that you can just have a lot of thunderers, or you can have a lot of rangers with
Yep.
either the crossbows or the throwing axes, because throwing axes are actually strength plus 1, so they're going to be at least strength 4. And
Hmm.
the reason why you might want to have the throwing axes on and crossbows is that the Sky Lanterns can just fly past you and get behind you, and if you have to spend a whole turn turning your dwarf rangers around to see them, you
Not great.
definitely have less damage potential. I do think that if you're playing against Cathay, you probably deploy your rangers in skirmish, even if there's like 18 guys in the unit. Still skirmish, because guess what? You'll
Spread them
take
out.
more damage from the shooting than you will then if they charge you and some of the guys don't get incoherency. So sitting there being like, oh no, what if they charge me is probably not really the move. It's just I'm in skirmish, so now I'm -1 to hit from dragonfire bombs. Very useful. Also, the bombing run scatters and then maybe hits fewer guys. The trick I was doing is cool. Your bombing run happens, you bomb me, and then especially if there's 2 of these things, I can remove models that help kind of spread my skirmishers out even more. So the second bombing run hits even fewer guys because now I'm kind of spread out more than I was a minute ago. Because you already know at that point I didn't get charged, so I don't have to worry about the whole coherency thing. I can spread out for this turn. So I
Yep.
think that Rangers are definitely your friend. I mean, that's not really news. It's just that what I'm bringing up is the Rangers you put in your army anyway, you can use them in a different way. You can scout them to help protect your army from being, lantern scouted, against.
Let's
You can
talk about
scout them
that for a
first.
second. That's a
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah, scout
Not every
screens.
army has scouts. Dwarfs have scouts. For goodness
Yes.
sakes, takes at least one. You should take 2 probably. They don't need to be a big unit, but just being able to deploy. If you get to deploy your scout first, or again, even if they get one, you could then counter deploying the other. Being able to push those sky lanterns back with a scouting unit is a minimum 1 additional turn to shoot them before they get their full armament coming at you. It's a big deal. Dwarves have scouts. Please take a unit of scouts. It is a big deal to counter some of those sky lantern punishment. But we do have a whole bunch of other armies to get through,
Yes,
Evan.
I
So
want to say
any
one more
last
thing.
closing thoughts on dwarves?
The last thought is that I think it's Ruin the Furnace, is it? That it gives your whole unit, or the character at the very least, ward save versus flaming. So again, if you have that, it's really the Dragonfire bombs that I'm usually the most afraid of. So having high armor units, high toughness, good. That's always good for taking less damage from shooting. The Alchemist Mask can give you Plague of Rust at a pretty high casting value, so it's pretty hard to stop that. So that's where your Rune of Spellbreaking comes in. And then Rune of the Furnace, if you have some kind of a ward save versus flaming, remind your opponent Dragonfire bombs are flaming. So hey, guess what?
Yep.
Now you gave me a ward save. So those are
There's
all
not
the
a lot of
things.
flaming attacks in the game, but
Yeah.
the Sky Lanterns bring them. So finally, all of those anti-flaming defensive mechanics that exist in the game, there's a reason to take them. But all right, so there's some tips for the dwarves. Who do we have next, sir?
The next one up is Empire. I'm pretty sure. Do that or Bretonnia. Let me see. Read this book 17 million times. Hey, look at this absolute gorgeous
Ta-da.
man.
Yeah, he's
Oh
awesome.
my god, Empire is absolutely my favorite. I don't know if people know that. Been painting a lot lately. So Empire, similar to dwarves in the sense you've got the war machines. And hey, guess what? Great cannons they were the best cannon in the game until Cathayan cannons showed up. But your cannons
Different topic. Yep.
get to have engineers. They don't. They have to buy individual ogres. That very good. But again, you can have one engineer shared between multiple artillery pieces. That is an efficiency that you have to take advantage of, especially when you're playing against another, potentially a gun line. So if you're playing an Empire Grand Army list and you have like 1 or 2 cannons, guess what? Sky Lanterns are not behemoths, no matter how large they are. So you can actually bounce cannonballs through more than one of them at a time. So instead of just mindlessly saying, I'm going to put it 10 from the back of that guy, remember, you don't have to do that. You can try to set up a trick shot that can get you multiple of these, especially because people very likely want to use multiple Sky Lanterns to try to bombing run or Dragonfire bomb the same target. And you could even potentially have like some bait. I think that against a Cathay list, you might just say, you know what, my Demogryphs, I'm going to send them forward and then I'll wait for them to bombing run me. And maybe they'll screw up and put both of them in a place where my cannons can hit 2 in a row. That would be amazing for you, right?
And let's talk about the crossfire with those cannons, Evan.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. So normally everyone's trying to maximize their efficiency of let's put all 3 cannons that I have or 2 cannons or whatever you took on the same hill and put the one engineer next to all of them. And I get it. You're trying to maximize your efficiency. But to Evan's point right there, the Sky Lanterns are the most dangerous when they are focusing their fire. And for the focus their fire, they're going to be going in the same direction. If your cannons are all in the same place, your war machines are in the same place, they either can avoid them or they could tackle them straight on and reduce your efficiency. I'd encourage you to, even though it's not as efficient for the engineer, to create crossfire lanes where you put your cannons at other ends of the table so that if they're trying to chase it down, or either to Evan's point, it's going to be a lot harder for them to maximize their firepower of their Sky Lanterns if they're trying to avoid your cannon angles on 2 different sides of the board. It is a huge deterrent for them to be able to position themselves.
Definitely. Another thing to keep in mind here is that if you do happen to take Inner Circle Knights of the White Wolf, because a lot of people like to bring the White Wolf Knights, I personally have other ones that are more my favorite, but Inner Circle Knights of the White Wolf, not regular Knights of the White Wolf, but Inner Circle Knights have a 5-up ward versus flaming. So another, hey, if you want to have a unit that actually has some kind of hope of charging a Sky Lantern and being able to live through it, stand and shoot, the Inner Circle Knights of the White Wolf, guess what? Got a 5-up ward save and a 2-up armor save. If they don't have Plague of Rust on them, that only goes down to a 3+ 5-up, which is very, very good. So you could, instead of getting like 7 or 8 wounds through, you might only lose 1 guy. And then you have Furious Charge with a lot of hammers wailing on them. And even if you get the back up and then they don't stay in combat for the following turn, you could have done a lot of damage in that one phase and then shoot the other one. So you charge one of them, shoot the second one, right?
So, and I think one last thing to also go through with Empire 2 is just assume everyone, especially newer players, you have the bloodlust when you get into the battlefield, you really want to maximize it. And everyone's trying to always think that the most instincts for newer players, I can tell you, is how do I kill all your units and not lose any of my units? I get it. Trust me, I get it. That sounds like a good idea. Great if you could pull it off. Instead, Evan said it before, bait, sacrificial units. You know, sometimes putting that juicy, block of 5x5 infantry that, let's face it, it wasn't that many points anyway, out in the center as a bait target. You want the Sky Lanterns to go after it because you've positioned your rifles, you've positioned your battle magic wizard, you've positioned your cannon. So if he goes after that target, on your turn, all of your guns are going to be able to fully unload on that Sky Lantern. And if you're having to sacrifice that infantry unit, but you're going to be able to take down that 1 or 2 Sky Lanterns, it's totally worth it. Okay. Sometimes it's okay. Not everyone's going to survive the battlefield. You need to assume some things will die, and that's okay. Use that to your advantage. Plan for this to die because you're going to trade your pawn for his queen. Okay.
Right. And just to keep in mind, there's a player psychology thing going on where if your whole army starts on one side of the field, especially if you used your Empire archers to scout forwards, and remember, enemy Sky Lanterns can scout, but they can't scout within 12 inches of any of yours. So if you win the roll off to put your scouts first, you chuck Empire archers straight out in front, right in the middle. They make a giant 12-inch bubble of no lanterns can deploy here. And then if they put one on one side, you can put more archers on the second side over here. And now they either have to go right next to each other on one absolute flank of the army, or they're nowhere near you. And when you do that, you say, great, now you're going to take a long time to get there. And if you win the turn to go up first or whatever, that's cool. I do think that Hans von Lovenhach has some play here to try to give you that first turn. But people want to be able to use their shooting units every turn. So if you put only one unit within enemy shooting range and they have to move towards it to be able to shoot it, their player psychology will very likely be like, okay, that's the only viable target. I'm going to move and shoot it. That sounds like a good idea at the time, but if that was a trap and you were willing to sacrifice 200 points of state troops who couldn't do anything in this battle anyway to force the two Sky Lanterns into a very bad position, and almost always the Sky Lanterns are completely by themselves. They're not going to have any support. The Lancers don't keep up, and they're not able to get there. The Lancers can actually get charged, so they're not going to be able to get across the table. So the Sky Lanterns are just hovering around by themselves without any support. And if you're able to bait them towards you early on, and then you can just gun the crap out of them, that's a great strategy, especially with the whole cannons bouncing through two units. Stone throwers, like for example, if you have a mortar and the mortar scatters, maybe it scatters from the one and hits the second one, that kind of thing. Right. Steam tank, for example, another great unit to just say, great, that's going to charge you. Your stand and shoot definitely won't do anything, and I got some impact hits, and we'll see what happens. And all you're trying to do is chip them down, and it's a war of attrition against a very powerful enemy who's both very durable, does a lot of damage, but you have to try to play your whole 2,000 point army against only 600-700 points of theirs, and that's how you win.
Yep. Remember, it's a 6-turn game.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, just one thing is that the Empire Sigmar Priest does have the prayer that I used to think was absolutely useless, which gives you a 5-up board versus shooting, and now I'm like, I might want that in every single list, because just having a single unit that has some kind of a ward save versus shooting could be the lifesaver.
Yep, it's a good call.
Okay, next up is the Bretonnians.
If you can get there. Maybe.
Okay,
there
so
we
the
go.
army list for Bretonnia, right? So, this isn't that hard. You've got
Peg Knights.
Yeah, you've got Peg Knights. You have a ward save. Now, Strength 4 AP1 is actually a particularly nasty profile for hurting your army in particular because your lady's ward save doesn't go to a 5-up versus Strength 4, and AP1 is at least hurting getting through some of your armor saves. So Pegasus Knights are going to be pretty hard done by that, especially if the whole Plague of Rust goes off. If your Peg Knights get Plague Arrested, you cannot charge that turn. You will just lose all of them to stand and shoot. So you have to just fly away, do it, save your turn for later, right?
Keep in mind, don't do those long bomb charge with the Pegasus Knights. So Pegasus Knights, especially with the character, absolutely have enough punching power to punch through a balloon. But the balloons are fast. They move very fast, just as your Pegasus Knights move fast. So do not do those long bomb charges. Besides being shot on incoming in the charge, the biggest issue is you might not make that charge. And you are in big trouble if you're going to do it. You need to be planning for a 6-turn game. What can you do with your peasant bowmen? Again, scouting, sacrificial units. How do you position it so you're in a position where you can almost guarantee your Peg Knights are going to be able to charge and punch through that first balloon? And better yet, if you can position yourself so you can punch through the first balloon and overrun into the next balloon so that it can't fire at you as you're overrunning through the first balloon because you're skirmishing with the Peg Knight. Ideally, you're trying to position yourself to get a 2-for-1. It can be done. It's really hard to do that if you're doing it solo, but if you're remembering it's a 6-turn game and you're queuing up those archers or sacrificial things you need, even if you need to sacrifice a Knight of the Realm unit to sucker out those balloons, but if that means your Pegasus Knights can 1-2 through them, it's absolutely worth it.
Okay, so the Field Trebuchet is a very good catapult, just standard old catapult there. It's a little more durable than usual for it, so it could potentially survive more shooting. I think that you could take 2 Field Trebuchets as potential targets.
We went over it before. It's just as effective as the stone thrower, right?
Yes.
So we're going to keep repeating it. If we see a stone thrower in the army, stone throwers are excellent at killing balloons.
Okay, so then you also probably, at this point, I think that the Virtue of Heroism essentially just it's out compared to being Virtue of Knightly Temper and having an Ochre Blade or having the Sword of the Quest or something like that, where you've got a weapon that's actually does multi wound damage. And if
Hmm.
you just have either the Duke or the Baron with the Virtue of Knightly Temper and a multi wound damage weapon, that's what you want charging into the Sky Lantern and just messing up its day. Bonus points if you potentially have a damsel in there casting Glittering Robe, because again, Glittering Robe works versus shooting, even stand and shoot. Just make them not
Hmm.
hurt you, especially on the stand and shoot, because every single time you charge something that has that much shooting potential and it gets to stand and shoot, you're giving them another turn of shooting. So instead of 6 turns of shooting, they now get up to like 12 turns of shooting. And think about that, right? How much damage are they going to do? It's now twice as much potentially, right?
A
So
lot.
don't give them an additional turn to shoot you for no reason. Um, I don't
There's
think
also one
that
more very important magic item that you should be
the
taking.
banner of Shalons that doesn't let them stand and shoot against you, perhaps.
That's a good one. And there's a certain horn.
Oh, the Falcon Horn. Now, it definitely disappeared from every single competitive Bretonnia list when it became single use, and now it's starting to show back up again because the Sky Lantern problem
Hmm.
is so bad that most people are essentially building their list to say, okay, if I have to play against Cathay, I need to have my whole list, or at least a big section of my list, ready to be able to figure out what to do in that matchup. And otherwise, I'll just play whatever I brought against somebody. That's no, don't worry about it. It's just
But
so,
having
yeah.
shutting off flying for one turn in particular versus balloons is massive.
Mhm.
Absolutely massive.
Yeah, and if that helps you, for example, if you get to go first because you're playing Bretonnian Exiles, and it keeps them from being able to shoot you the first turn because you blow the Falcon Horn, now they can't get to you in time. That's always very good, especially if it helps you get onto the objective and then they don't have a response. That's also useful.
Hmm.
Not being able to fly over your troops is probably the main one. So balloons
Massive.
love to have you move forward. They'll bomb you and
Hmm.
shoot you, and then do either march or reserve move over the top of you, and now you're facing the wrong way. And then, unless if you have Pegasus Knights or Skirmishers, for example, you can't even fight them anymore. So now they're just behind you, and they will continue to shoot you the next turn. They don't ever have to turn around. They can just keep backing up and shooting backwards because they have the Howdah rule.
Yeah. Well, if you weren't taking Pegasus Knights before, let's face it, you were, but you definitely will be now. That's for sure. All
Definitely.
right. That's Bretonnia. Yeah. What do we have next, sir?
Coming up soon, the Wood Elves.
Ooh, what else?
Well, it's no secret the Wood Elves not only don't have war machines, but also every
They
single
don't.
arrow they have is strength 3, essentially, unless you have a character who's like, okay, I've got 1 strength 4 shot, or I've got a very expensive bow that gives me like 3 strength 4 shots. So, strength 3 against toughness 5 targets is not very good, and you don't have any
No.
spells in your whole army that can lower the enemy's toughness to make your shooting better. So, there's nothing really about
Yeah, well,
that.
the
Yeah.
challenge is you could still take poison, and poison is
Yeah.
effective in the sense that if you roll sixes, don't get me wrong, poison is great in this situation. Those sixes become, instead of needing a 6 to wound, you wound on a 4 plus. The challenge with Wood Elves is the cost of your troops to take poison. It's hard to get the volume of shots you need for that to really pay out. So, Wood Elves in particular, you have to find ways to focus fire. But even before, a lot of people were taking poison out of their armies. I encourage you to reevaluate putting poison back in your armies. It's a huge deal being able to wound them on a 4 plus because the Sky Lantern saves are not that good, and you are going to get wounds through.
All right, so that's definitely one way to look at it. I definitely am more of the camp that I want to have the Arcane Bodkins because even though they're strength 3, at the very least we
Mm,
start at AP 2, and if you roll the 6 to wound, you get the Armor Bane. So now we're at AP 3, which is usually what, that goes through the full 4-up armor save of what most Sky Lanterns tend to have. So
yep.
that's more what I'm going for, is that I'd rather get rid of their whole armor save than have a little bit higher chance of sometimes wounding them better. That's definitely what my move
Both
is.
are valid. Yeah.
Yes, they're both good valid strategies. The strategy with Wood Elves against Sky Lanterns is mostly to have so many units that have evasive, because evasive is a very useful tool against the Dragonfire bombs, particularly because they very often will fly 1 inch away from you and then want to throw it at short range. And if you can just fall back even just a couple inches further, you can then be another -1 to hit because now you're at long range, and they have no way to stop this because they're only 9 inches range on their weapons
Yep.
ever. So if you just go from 1 inch away to 5 inches away, boom, now you're another -1 to hit. And then if every single unit in your army is skirmishing, another -1 to hit. And the big problem with the Dragonfire bombs is that every single hit that usually against like a big block is on like a 3 plus or a 2 plus turns into multiple
Hmm.
hits. Well, if the rolls to hit are just like a 5 or a 6 plus all of a sudden, now they just can't hit the side of a barn. And even if they do D3 hits each,
Yep.
they are only very lucky shots actually do anything, and the damage potential drops off a cliff.
Yeah, another good thing to look at is, again, this is something that players typically weren't taking as many of them before. But while it's not the most powerful dragon, the Wood Elf Lord on a dragon absolutely is a legitimate threat to Sky Lanterns. It's not as durable as the other dragons, but it's still a dragon. It's still good. It still has high toughness, high wounds. You can put some good armor saves and ward saves on your character, and you absolutely can punch through a Sky Lantern. So I know often a lot of the Wood Elf lists, at least more recently, have been very MSU focused and have many of them have gone away from the dragon. This might be something you want to take a look again at the dragon, because a dragon has huge threat range and absolutely can be a big problem for the Sky Lanterns.
Yeah, and the Wood Elf Dragon, when the Glade Lord is riding it, which I think it's the only character who can ride anyway, but the Wood Elf Dragon
Yeah.
gets to have evasive. So everything I just said about evasive, the dragon gets it. And now if the lanterns fly behind you and shoot at your dragon, he can evade away and reform to face towards them now. So if they try to fly behind you, you can say, nope, I'm going to turn around. And that might be even a reason where they might not even shoot you because they don't want to give you the free reform.
Yep, it's pretty powerful. So that's something. And of course, with the Wood Elves, they do have spellcasters, right? So more so than maybe Bretonnians and such, you're going to want to be looking at the spell. So I guess the question for you, Evan, if you're playing the Wood Elf, what sorcerer, what lore are you taking that you think is going to give you the edge for
So
Sky
there's two
Lanterns?
options, and my recent play that I've been doing with Wood Elves before I kind of switch back to Empire again is to take both, one on a Spell Singer and one on the Treeman Ancient. And the two lores are the lore of the Wilds, which is the new Arcane Journal one, which gives you the very, 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 very incredibly fun and very strong, especially for Sky Lantern spell, the Fury of Athaloran, which is Strength 6. It's D3 plus 1, Strength 6, AP 2, D3 damage hits. So it's basically, I tell my opponent, I'm going to hit you with D3 plus 1 Ogre Blade hits from shooting. And they're like, what? Yeah, so the fact that it's high strength and that nothing else in the Wood Elf list has that is just an absolute chunker. And remember, we're doing that kind of damage without having to charge them, without having to give them a stand and shoot against us. So that is potentially very good. And it often does about as much damage as if the Glade Lord charged the unit and hit him with an Ogre Blade, right?
Yep. And keep in mind that the Sky Lanterns are often ahead of the rest of the army. They're often further away from wherever their wizards are.
Yes.
So be careful about where you're positioning your spellcaster so that he's having to use a Fated Dispel to try and stop your spell from going off versus his Wizardly Dispel from a Shogungan Lord or something else. So you should often be able to do this. Maybe not always, but often. It's rare to see a Shogungan Lord hanging out between two balloons. That's typically not a good strategy.
Yeah, it's not very commonly seen. And then the other one that I like a lot is high magic, and in particular, being able to have some kind of a bunker unit that you're just trying to make ethereal, because Cathay has, till very recently, no magical attacks in their kind of hyper cringy competitive build. It was just, we have Sky Lanterns, they throw Dragonfire Bombs, they're flaming and they're non-magical. So if you have any way to become ethereal or to have a ward save against flaming, it's like, oh wait, now it doesn't do anything anymore, right? So that's a potential solution. And so being ethereal on, let's say, a unit of like 25 Glade Guard that's just all in one block is great. You normally want to bomb me, but now you can't. And the only problem with this is now that with the lower casting values with magic, the spell just doesn't go off every single turn like it kind of used to. Especially if Cathay took no wizard at all and you were kind of playing with the old casting rolls. Your level 3 or level 4 wizard with high magic and lore familiar would be able to kind of consistently just have your big unit be ethereal the entire game, and they would have no way to hurt you. But now it's just a complete dice roll, which is better for the meta, but worse for this matchup.
All right, cool. Let's move on.
It's the last one here is High Elves. Now, some of this is the same, because while High Elves do have War Machines, they are one of the worst War Machines in the game, because the Repeater Bolt Thrower was very much a feel bad, incredibly strong thing in 8th edition, and they tried to make it as untakeable as possible. Because it's so for one thing, there's only 2 crewmen, which means it has 2 wounds. So you only have to do 2 damage to shoot it. So a single Ushabti Great Bow shot can kill a bolt thrower in the high elf list, and it's so many points for what it does. And the main reason why it's a lot of points is because it's elves, so it's ballistic skill 4 instead of 3. But that doesn't make up for the fact that it's like incredibly expensive. So you probably don't take that. So you have Sisters of Avalorn, which have higher AP shooting, just like the... now, look, everyone loves Sisters of Avalorn. They're very interesting. They do have evasive, so I was telling you about that. But the Wood Elves have, Arcane Vikings, which is AP2 instead of the AP1 of the Sisters of Avalorn, right? And they're also evasive on their Deepwood Scout. So again, it's no better than that. And then with High Elves, you have different dragons, but you have some of the similar lore. So you can definitely still do the ethereal trick. If you happen to be someone who brought like 20 white lions of Krace to a battle against Cathay, sorry to tell you, but it's very unlikely they will ever get to combat. So all you're going to try to do is make sure that they just don't die. And the main way you need to do that is, first of all, you don't have Warband, so you don't need to be in lots of ranks to get your leadership. So you will need to take your models off the tray and not put them on a 5x4 tray, and instead make them very, very wide, because you do not want to get bombing run, right? And a bombing run on a more of a square unit just absolutely obliterates you. The second thing here is that you have archers. I think they're just less good than the wood elf ones, but your magic bows are actually better. So like the bow of the Seafarer on your Sister of Avalorn champion is a little bit more reasonably priced than the wood elf bows, which are like 55 points for some reason.
Yep.
So that's a good option. The dragons here, again, just like the wood elf one, they don't have evasive, but they can be a little bit more durable. The high elf dragons have the best defensive kit in the game, so it's just really hard for them to ever die, especially against cannons.
Yep, and again, you just get that character in there. You don't need your character necessarily to be doing the damage. The dragon will eventually eat the lantern, so it's really just about taking that armor save, that ward save, that regen save, and over a couple rounds of combat, the dragon's going to eat it up. And you just need to make sure that the shooting attack, you have enough defense to get in there without having to worry about being shot down.
Definitely. I think that to be honest, I think that High Elves are usually a better army than the Wood Elves, but in this particular case, I don't see what they really bring to the table. Like, for example, the worst thing to do against Cathay is that I kind of discovered this weekend is have a bunch of Toughness 3 Knights, because they Alchemist Mask you, so you have Plague or Rust on you. Then they have Ring of Jet, which ignores your armor save anyway, and if it's Strength 2 versus Toughness 3, it's basically Viletide on tap, that they just have multiple of those. And then the Dragonfire Bomb stuff
effective.
is... Yeah. So essentially, if you have any kind of like Silver Helms or Dragon Princes, you are not going to be using them in combat this game. You are going to be running around and trying to have them not die, because
But
that's
other things
just how
you could
bad
be
it is.
doing.
Yes.
So
you
again, you have the dragon. You have great wizards, whether high magic or battle magic or other things. You should also, again, you could consider the phoenixes or other things. In particular, frost phoenix is more defensive, and most players haven't been taking the bolt throwers. And don't get me wrong, the bolt throwers are not the most effective war machine in the game. They're actually one of the least effective war machines in the game. But taking a few of them and putting them on the table absolutely can take off some wounds of those sky lanterns. They're huge. They're easy to see. It is something that you should be considering. It's not necessarily the best answer, but if you add all of these things up, it will give you some additional methods to deal with the sky lanterns. Running into a Cathay army with sky lanterns, to Evan's point, those big blocks or those big blocks of knights, it's not going to end well.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that the only other thing to mention is that, hey, if you have like Phoenix Guard, for example, you could you have a better ward save versus Flaming, but Phoenix Guard are kind of I think the less interesting of the other ones. Yeah. So it's there's things you could do to have like ward saves versus Flaming for sure. In
the
this
Sky
list.
Cutter.
Yeah, I mean the Sky Cutter. I personally can't stand that the model is so incredibly fragile. Like I have a high value placed on the fact that I want my models not to break. So, but it is very.
But that's
useful.
the model, and that's also depending on if you're using the fly stand. Personally, I put all flying models on brass rods from the hobby store. You can get them very cost effective as the flying stand. But either way, the Sky Cutter is a very fast chariot, definitely very maneuverable. You can actually put a bolt thrower on it. And it hits very, very hard. So that is one thing that the High Elves have that the Wood Elves don't have that absolutely should be considering.
Right. I forgot to mention, that if you want to
to
shoot with High Elves, there's basically no reason not to have the Sky Cutter with a bolt thrower on it instead of just Eagle Claw bolt throwers, because the Sky Cutter is just more durable, more maneuverable with essentially the same. Unless if you're shooting at a unit that's going to break ranks, the Sky Cutter bolt thrower is just better. So it's just a little bit more points to not die, and you still get to shoot.
Yep. All right, that's the High Elves. So definitely some suggestions there. Who do we have left?
We have the evil people.
Let's move on to the evil guy. Excellent.
So this I'm going to let you take this one away because you're the orc person.
Oh, I love Orcs and Goblins. You actually have, interestingly enough, Orcs and Goblins actually have some of the best tools to actually deal with sky lanterns. I'm not implying that makes it easy. I didn't say that. But at first out of the gate, not only do you have the stone throwers, but you also have the Doom Diver catapults, right? So taking the rock lobbers and the Doom Divers and catapults are super effective at taking down those sky lanterns. They hit just as hard as the ones for the other factions, and the Doom Divers are effectively just a rock lobber that is more accurate. And so it's pretty easy it's as long as you don't misfire, Can't promise you won't roll a misfire. As long as you don't misfire, you're going to get some hits in. It's going to be very effective. They're not going to be able to hide from you. And you definitely want to space them out, as we mentioned earlier, across the board. There's no reason for an Orcs and Goblin player to put their war machines next to each other. You want to space them out, and you want to make it as difficult as you can in terms of board control and placement, line of sight for the enemy. On top of that, of course, you have the Black Orc War Boss on the Wyvern, who is one of the most durable characters. No, he's not a Chaos Lord, but a Black Orc War Boss, one of my favorite builds with him is just give him a great weapon. That's it. Don't, in terms of melee offense. You put him on the Wyvern, a great weapon, but he has the Choppa, he has Furious Charge, yeah, those are the rules. But if then you give him, comes with full plate armor save. Then you also give him a shield, so when he gets shot at, he could use that shield. And then you give him troll hide trousers, right? And then you, well, I guess at that point you don't need the shield. And then you give him the talisman protection. So you have that ward save, you have that regen save, you have that great armor save. You're on a super tough Wyvern. You have a good number of wounds. It's super cost effective, and he's great at popping balloons. But then the other things the Orcs and Goblin have is all your squig hoppers. Let me tell you, one of the things the Sky Lanterns hate the most is random movers. Sky Lanterns absolutely hate random movers because guess what? They don't get to stand and shoot versus random movers. They just get to slam into you, and everything that's a random mover that's a squig is hitting on strength 5, and they're hitting real hard and with a lot of attacks, and they're great at popping balloons. Whether it's a mangler squigs are not as effective because they only have 4 wounds and they will get shot to pieces right away very often. But again, if you have your random movers, that's the thing. The advantage you have is you can hide them behind terrain to avoid getting shot by the Sky Lantern. And because you're a random mover, guess what? You can go through that forest and still slam into that Sky Lantern, or you can go around that building and such and still slam into them. It's incredibly powerful versus them. Of course, you do have the new skirmishing rules that they added in the FAQ, so you need to be cognizant about that and such. But other things to keep in mind, I love putting the Goblin War Boss in the Cave Squig, and taking the Wallapa's one-hit wonder is also super. It's 10 points, I think. It's super effective for getting a couple more hit. I've had him kill the Sky Lantern basically on his own. It was already whittled down between him and his squig before the rest of the unit that he joined. The squig hoppers actually hit it. So the Orc and Goblin army actually have quite a few, and that's before magic. Guess what's still great for Sky Lantern? You know what's even more easy to take down a Sky Lantern? A Sky Lantern with Itchy Nuisance. Yeah. Oh boy, that sure is effective. And on top of that, guess what? The Sky Lanterns still get hit by fanatics. So the big thing is if they get to shoot 2 Sky Lanterns at your 20-man Night Goblin unit before you've released your fanatics, you are toast. You're going to get wiped out. But if you're taking that 30-man unit, or you're making sure you position yourself so that you're going to release them on the enemy turn, or however you need to do it to get those fanatics out there, fanatics are very effective at taking down Sky Lanterns. So that's before we get to other war machines, like again, the Goblin Bolt Throwers. No, their ballistic skill is not great, but they're super cheap at 45 points. There's just a lot of things in the Orc and Goblin book that actually hit really, really hard and are actually great at taking down the lanterns.
So I just thought of a couple things. So first of all, I think the Doom Diver might be one of the best artillery, not only in the game, but also just against the Sky Lantern because of being able to flat back, and then you still have the D3 +1 damage. So it possibly
super powerful.
More powerful than a cannon because it can shoot around corners and stuff. Secondly, you have the incredibly cheap ambushing fast cav that can skirmish and has reserve move, the Goblin Wolf Rider. So you have ambush, you get some reserve move. That lets you move twice on the turn that you show up from ambush. And guess what?
Yeah, but you only get that in that Arcane Journal list. That's
you can only do the ambush in the Arcane Journal list?
Right.
Are you sure? You can reserve move otherwise? Well, okay, even if you don't ambush, here's my plan I've got for you, Mike. You charge the Sky Lantern with something, like let's say Boar Boys or Black Orc on Wyvern. Cool. Everyone knows you get to charge it, you'll fight it in combat, it doesn't die, and then it can choose to just fly away from you by using a fallback in good order. But fallback in good order has to pass through any units that are behind it. So what if you charge it, it gets to do its stand and shoot or tries to move d6 inches away, and then after it gets into combat, you then march or reserve move your skirmishing Wolf Riders who move 9 inches into a conga line behind this lantern. So as soon as it loses combat and falls back in good order, it just bounces all the way off the table. Because you can just conga line 1 inch apart, these Goblin Wolf Riders in a big string, and they have to keep fall. Just like how the Pillar of Fire used to bounce through entire armies, they will have to fall back through all of those models until they're off the table. And the bigger your base is, the more easy that is to have happen, right?
Yep, and they are very cheap. Definitely to do this combo. So again, I don't want to. We still have a lot more armies to go through, but again, I love Orcs and Goblins. They are so much fun, but they actually have, I think, one of, if not the most tools in order to deal with Sky Lanterns from any other army out there.
Definitely, definitely. I think that just the fact that the Sky Lantern has to get close to you, but can't really be interacted with in melee combat as easily, means that the fanatics and things like that that can do damage without actually getting into close combat is one of the best
Mm-hmm.
tools you have. The worst part about it is the Sky Lantern can very often do so much damage to a Night Goblin unit it'll panic it off the table. So it's all
Yep.
about that like kind of game of chicken
Get
and
it out
egg
there
about
first.
and potentially against Cathay, you might just say, okay, I'm going to release all my fanatics turn one and just have them bounce around the table freaking randomly. And if my goblins die, my goblins die. But at least the fanatics are just floating around there, and they might just
Yeah. And the
randomly
Sky
bounce into
Lanterns
you.
can shoot them. Yeah, and I
Yes.
think the biggest thing again to the random movers, even hiding behind things, even if you can't get the charge off, if they're trying to the constant strategy of fly behind you or fly out of your charge arc, you can't do that for a random mover. They go
Yes.
360.
Yes.
So they're incredibly effective at catching Sky Lanterns.
For sure. Okay, so we have Warriors of Chaos up next, and this is another one of kind of your favorite factions, one of my favorites to play against because I think the models
Yeah.
are freaking gorgeous, even though I don't necessarily want
They're,
to play
they're
them
amazing.
myself.
They're a great army. Well, there's it's chaos is
I want to paint
an
them.
acquired taste. That's okay both. So again, of course, just out of the gate, the obvious thing, the Chaos Lord on the Dragon, is he as powerful as he used to be in a 2,000 point game? No. Is he still incredibly durable and very good at, even with just a great weapon at killing Sky Lanterns? Absolutely. Again, the big thing is to build a defensive build because the Dragon plus a great weapon is going to tear down the Sky Lantern, if not the first round of combat, certainly the second one, almost guaranteed, unless you just happen to roll ones continuously. So again, very, very effective. And again, you will get your stomps because the Sky Lanterns are heavy chariots. They are not monsters. So very, very effective being on that dragon. Another thing, while you don't have the war machines, I'm not going to consider the Hell Cannon, sorry, as an effective war machine. You do have the magic missile bunkers, and Chaos Army is one of the most effective armies at making those magic missile bunkers. So you really focus on whether it's a Demon Prince, whether it's a Sorcerer of Tzeentch, right? Taking the 2 or 3 magic missile attacks. In particular, if they, again, position your wizards so they're having to use their Fated Dispel. The Sky Lanterns are in the front of the army, and you can really throw all your missiles at it. 1 or 2 Sky Lanterns focus fire, and he's only able to Fated once. You were going to tear them down pretty effectively with that bunker. The challenge with that bunker, that magic missile bunker, is you typically want to put them in Marauder units, but the Marauders cavalry are very vulnerable to the Sky Lanterns shooting if they get within range. And of course, then you'd say, well, let me put it in a Chaos Warrior bunker, but you just don't have the maneuverability then. So really, you still want it in that Marauder Horseman bunker, but you have to be very careful about placement so you're not going to get shot off the board before you're able to bring your missiles to bear on them. So typically, you want to hide them behind terrain, a hill or something until, right, it's like, hey, play chicken, right? Somebody has to come out first, throw something out there, put something out there that's going to bring him out from behind wherever he's hiding, and then you can unleash your magic missiles on him. So that's very effective. Chaos also have, again, back to random movers, giant chaos spawns, right? So I know everybody loves the Corn one, getting a killing blow. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome. But at the same time, taking a giant spawn of Nurgle and getting that 5-up regen save makes you significantly more durable to all that shooting attack they're going to unleash on you. And again, being that random mover means they can't respond to you when you're charging them with that random moving attack. So Chaos has some very effective tools that typically you'd be taking a lot of this stuff anyway. It's really not that different from what would be in your normal roster. But if you were taking those big bricks of Chaos Knights or Chaos Warriors in big, tightly packed formations, you're going to be in trouble. So this is one of those times you might want to be looking at opportunities where you can take drilled. Chaos does not get nearly as many of them as some of the other rosters. And again, I would go away from some of the chosen or more expensive elite troops that the Sky Lanterns just view as absolutely juicy targets. So again, plenty of ways. And of course, Warpfire Dragon. If you thought 1 dragon was good, hey, 2 dragons sometimes is even better if you're trying to counter Sky Lanterns. They're fast, they're durable, they cover a whole bunch of the board. And if your Sky Lantern opponent is taking that Talisman of Protection ward save, right, get the Warpfire Dragon next to him, take down that ward save with his aura, and that's going to make your other abilities, your magic missiles and things, a lot more effective when you're trying to shoot them too.
I will say that you could probably pull off the Marauder Horseman trick even better than the basically use your fast cav to run behind a Sky Lantern that just got charged, and then force a conga line. Even if you're in marching column, especially if you have like got the Warhounds to do this potentially, you get a marching column of Warhounds, and they just create a conga line with some horsemen that says, "Great, now you're going to bounce off the table as soon as you do that whole fallback in order nonsense, right?" And
Yep.
then when you win combat, they then either stay there or they do the fallback in order and die. And it's like, great. So then they're locked in with for example, your dragon guy. And they will not be prepared for this plan at all. I will say that you can, and no one ever does this, but I think it's possible. You could take Chaos Marauders and give them the skirmish upgrade, and give them Mark
You
of
can.
Tzeentch, and then I
Mhm.
have a wizard bunker that skirmishes. Now, this is almost always a Beastmen strategy, where they use Gore or Ungore, for example, in a skirmish formation with a bunch of viletide wizards in there. Warriors of Chaos can do the same thing with Blue Fire of Tzeentch and a bunch of their
Mhm.
bound spell items and just create a magic missile skirmish bunker that, instead of being really, really fast, like the Marauders, the Marauder Horsemen are, it's just really, really mobile, and it still has that -1 to hit versus shooting, and it has like a 360 line of sight and that kind of thing. So if this
Yep.
is
And you
the
have more
only thing
wounds.
you...
That's the advantage.
More
Instead of
wounds.
having typically the 10 wounds of the bunker, you'd have 20 wounds typically of the infantry. So there are some advantages to it.
I will also say that I think that the Demon Prince, just being a guy who skirmishes, you can take Demonic Plate Mail to be toughness 6, which makes Dragonfire
Mhm.
Bombs, for example, very much harder for them to hurt you, and it drops your damage
Absolutely.
in half. So I like the Demon Prince. I think he's incredibly expensive, but he is the coolest dude in Wars Kids, and
Yep.
he is the absolute reason why I fantasize about buying these, and then I keep remembering that I have a wife,
Yep.
and so I don't.
Also, Chaos has two. It is worth at least mentioning two -1 to hits that you are able to
Oh,
stack.
in
Right. You
shooting
can
phase,
take in the
yes.
shooting phase. You can take the banner that gives you the -1 to hit, and then there's the Chaos power that you can take -1 to hit. So if you do want to make sure that one unit, and again that applies to the unit, not just to the character. So if you do still want to take that big brick of cavalry to for that threat range, and you should consider it, but not 5-man. You can need to be able to take some shots, but making it -2 to hit you, it's massively going to reduce their effectiveness. It's not going to help you versus the cannons, but versus the Sky Lanterns, which is what we're talking about right now, a very effective combo.
Yeah, and I will just say that I do this all the time. You can bring more than one unit to be your potential bunker. Like you could bring Chaos Warriors, right? And they can be a bunker if you're playing a normal game,
Mhm.
or you can bring some Marauders and Skirmish. They're like 7 points each, and great. So I have 10 Marauders and Skirmish. If I'm playing Cathay, my Wizard goes in there instead. You can do
Mhm.
that. You're allowed. It's not against the rules. Okay,
Absolutely.
so Beastman Brayherds, similar thing. You've got Viletide. Viletide does a lot of damage versus things like Sky Lanterns, as long as they get within range. And guess what? They have shorter range than you, so they probably want to get too close to you. So if you have your little Viletide bunker of a bunch of different Bray Shamans that are all level 1, some of them have Jagged Dagger, some of them have Hag Tree Fetish or whatever, and they're in that unit that skirmishes, so they're already -1 to hit. You've got the Beastmen have the same type of a bonus upgrade you can buy to a character to make them -1 hit in the shooting phase. So if you just get that bonus on this unit as well and make a skirmish bunker that's already -2 to hit versus any kind of shooting attack, then you can become very anti-lantern proof while being a nice little unit that hangs out right next to your what's it called? Freaking Hearthstone. Yeah, it's not on the
Mhm.
general armor list.
Mhm.
Hang on next to your Hearthstone, get another bonus to cast, and just say, great, if you want to come near basically anything I've got, you're just going to get absolutely laser beamed. And I think that that is a very cool thing to do. What happened to me during at Palm Springs Open was that my Hag Tree Fetish Viletide man was solo, and he was sitting right next to a big unit of 25 Primal Herd or 30 Primal Herd. And I was like, great, so he's not the closest target, so he can't be shot at. Well, against Sky Lanterns, the 25 or so Primal Herd in a big block can very often just get either panicked or just entirely annihilated down to a man in one turn, and then they still have some Dragonfire bombs to throw into the solo character who is now not safe anymore. So that doesn't
Yep.
work. You have to have minuses to hit and or not be in a ranked up unit to live.
Yep. Yep. Mhm.
A
All
Doom
right.
Bull that almost everyone always tries to put in a big block, you can just run as a skirmisher so that he can react and respond and charge in different directions. So you might not need to have your Doom Bull in the Gore block, which is never going to see combat. Instead, deploy your Gore in skirmish and have them hang out somewhere where they're not getting shot, and have the Doom Bull run around separately in skirmish, trying to just see who he's going to chase down. That's a good option.
Especially if you give him some really good armor and a ward save, right? It's going to make him fairly durable.
Okay. Other than that, I mean, obviously things like the Gorgon, you can't monster slay the chariot, so you don't really do. That's not really your move.
And
So
they
it's
can still
yeah,
giant chaos spawn. Let's not forget about that.
yeah. I try to forget about that.
You're still angry because they killed a bunch of your guys. Let's move on. Um,
I am. I'm still angry about that. That used to be the thing I complained about. That the Corn Giant Chaos Spawn somehow has Killing Blow on its impact hits. I don't understand that at all. It makes no sense.
let's move on. Let's move on. Different
Right.
video.
Every time that I bring up a good point. So let's move on. Okay, so Tomb Kings. Now we're gonna end strong here. We're gonna end strong because Tomb Kings is the second army that I think has the best play against the really annoying Cathay list. And it gets to
They
do
do.
that while not taking like the units that aren't very good. Normally, it's taking units that are very good. So you've got catapults, just as good as normal, but you have skulls of the foe, so you can help lower leadership. And guess what? Light of death. As soon as you lower someone's leadership, like with necromancy spells or with the skulls of the foe, light of death is potentially worse than a vampire count scream. And I know that the screams are kind of the big bugaboo of the meta in some ways. But if the light of death, if they actually fail that leadership test, you just get swallowed. The damage you take is similar to the Fury of Athel. It's just more hits than that, so it's absolutely insane. I haven't seen it happen, but it is possible to happen for sure.
Oh, it happened a few times over the weekend. Oh, I absolutely saw.
Oh, the light of death actually, the person fails the test and then they get completely annihilated.
I think it failed a test once or twice. I just know that screams and light of deaths were being used over the weekend on lanterns. But anyway,
Well,
okay,
if you
but
don't
they
do
have
that,
Ushapti too.
yeah, and you have the Ushapti who've got the great bows. They're only AP 1, but they are high strength and they do 2 damage each. So as soon as you get, Armor Bane or if you get Plague of Rust on something, you just fire a lot of great bow shots at it. There's never any minuses to hit, so you're just always doing a decent amount of damage. You can always reform or turn to face the target without any further minuses to hit. And Ushapti are also a halfway decent unit at not caring as much about the damage they're taking, because for some reason, Flaming doesn't turn off regen, so Ushapti still get to regen against all those Dragonfire bombs. And the bombing run doesn't hurt them as much because they're a monstrous infantry unit, so don't get like 75 hits versus a big template.
Absolutely. They also have these screamers called catapult. Again, anything that's a stone thrower type thing is fairly effective at killing the lanterns, in particular because their bases are so large.
Yes.
So again, another effective weapon. And the Necrosphinx, let's not talk about that. He flies. I know it doesn't look like it, but he does fly. He's actually quite fast. And so again, he can have a lot of threat range in terms of, hey, Sky Lantern, come over here. You're going to get charged by this big old monster.
That's for sure. That's definitely a potential. We do also have, you just have some pretty good priests with some good bonuses to cast here. You got the ability to heal your guys back. The whole reason why poison archery in Wood Elves is sad is the inverse here, because the archers are so cheap that as soon as you stick the 30-point item on a guy and you put them in the poison archer unit, then you just have a crap load of archer shots. And then suddenly, what they did to poison is basically, instead of it being good on the units that kind of supposed to be good on, it's now just okay on units that were broken, and they're bad on the units that used to be, fine. So it's bad on like the skink skirmishers and bad on the wood elves, but it's good on the things that, used to be kind of a problem. So you still want to stick that one item on the big unit and have a million poison shots.
Yeah, a big skeleton archer unit with volley fire is still going to get a ton of hits in on a lantern and wounding on 4, and they will wound on 4s for those poison shots. So it definitely adds up.
Okay, and you also have a banner that gives you -1 to hit against shooting, and your dragons have an innate I'm harder to hit with shooting because of some beetles that are floating around on the inside of me or something. I don't know what the rule is or the lore of it is, but basically all the Tomb King dragons are always -1 to hit from shooting. So if the other person cares about that, then it's an inbuilt bonus.
Yeah, plus there's the fun combo you see often where you put the mummy, the Tomb King on the dragon, and to give him the Armor of Ages, you have to re-roll to wounds, successful rolls to wounds. So again, makes it very, very, it's a lot harder if you have to re-roll all your successful wounds in order to get damage through, especially if you happen to be on a dragon.
Yes. Okay, that's it.
Cool.
So again, this video, we were kind of trying to work out a little bit of my issues that I developed over the weekend, but no, we wanted to basically publicize it. There are things you can do to play against this kind of unit, even though the unit is very clearly too cheap for what it's doing and is kind of skewing the entire meta. That doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do, and that even taking a normal army that has some of these units in it, you have no tools to respond to. Now, when I was playing Knightly Order, which is not a normal army, it's a very kind of a skew list of its own sense, there wasn't really any tools to deal with this, at least with the Knightly Order I picked. Now, if I was going to play, for example, the Knightly Order, and I wanted to make sure I had one that had a good game into Cathay, it would have to be Blazing Sun, because all of the knights have evasive. So for all the reasons we mentioned earlier, evasive, very, very good. And then Blazing Sun also happens to be the army that gets to have both wizards, who can cast some magic missiles, and cannons. So you could have some knights, some cannons, some wizards, whatever, and still have evasive. So whenever they try to shoot you, you could just evade, potentially completely out of range of their 9-inch bombs. So that is an interesting play that I will potentially think about. Now, I don't know if I care that much, but I would like to do that.
Yeah, so again, this wasn't meant to be a silver bullet, do this one thing, suddenly Sky Lanterns aren't going to be a challenge. They are still going to be a challenge, in particular if you're playing against a really good opponent. who's going to know a lot of these things that we're talking about, and they will be working on trying to counter those things. But we're hopefully, for the more casual or average player, trying to give you hopefully some tips or tricks looking at your roster and maybe adjust a couple things that maybe you weren't thinking about before, or maybe you had dropped out of your list from the previous meta, and maybe you could bring back into your list in the current meta to help you mitigate or handle some of these challenges. So we definitely love Cathay. They're a really cool roster. We know Sky Lanterns are a little bit overpowered right now. We're confident GW will address it. We just don't know when. But until then, and even when they do, here's some things you could do to make the fighting the challenge of the Lanterns maybe go a little bit more in your favor.
All right, so everyone, if you liked the video, you can always hit the like button. That gives us a good indication that you liked it, and you can leave a comment. So, for example, if you really want us to do this kind of a video, but for all the legacy armies, you can let us know. Or if you are a Cathay player and you don't want to use the Sky Lanterns, but you also need to have some kind of a plan to play against them, we can also talk about that too. So let us know in the comments below if that's something you're interested in.
Awesome. All right, Evan, any last closing words, sir?
I have to say, stay legendary.
All right, we'll see you next time.